All right, welcome to another episode of Legacy Spotlight. I got two of my favorite players of all time on the call today. Two guys I grew up with. I watched play, cheered against, cheered with. But overall, man, I have so much respect for these guys. I got Damon Bacote and Tony Rutland on the call. I've talked to these guys already. Like I said, I've grown up with them, but I really felt like today was important. The conversation I've had with them and the things I've seen them do, not just on the court, but since their career ended and their new careers, I thought it was important that we take some time today to really spotlight their legacies and the impact they have on the community and just kind of review their journey to where they've been at. So right now, Damon and Tony, and I'll start with you, Damon, talk about how you got into basketball. When did you know you were a good basketball player? Like, how did you get into the game of basketball?
Well, I've been around it for like my whole life since I can remember. My dad did 30 years in the Air Force, and he always, when we traveled from place to place, he was always like the base coach, you know. So I've been around the sport of basketball ever since I can remember, and I've been playing since I was probably like 8. But when I realized I was going to be pretty good is when we got stationed in Hampton at Langley, and I remember playing for the base team, for the rec team, and Tone was on my team. That's when I first met Tone. We were probably about 12 years old, and I was playing center. And you know, I just remember like having a pretty good year that year, and I was like, oh man, maybe I can go somewhere with that. And that summer we went and played AAU together. I played, you know, Tone's dad introduced us to the AAU scene with Boo Williams, and on that team was me, Tone, Allen Iverson, Morocco Brown, Aaron Brooks, just a lot of good guys from around the way, and I held my own with those guys, and I think we came in like second place in the state that year, and we went to the national championship, and I had a good national championship tournament, and all of a sudden I was like, I'm not gonna be bad here, you know. I'm gonna be all right. And in my 8th grade year, I went and played JV for Hampton High and led the team in scoring as an 8th grader, and kind of, as they say, the rest is history from there. But it was probably that summer, you know, that year coming into 7th grade, that I realized that I had a chance to be pretty good with basketball.
Absolutely. And Tony, when was that moment for you? Same time, or was it a little bit before, after?
Yeah, when it came to basketball, I think it was like 10th, when I was 10. Like I said, military, my dad was in the military, kind of started back at Langley Air Force Base. I played every sport but basketball, and basketball was the last one I got into. But, you know, when I was in there working out, my dad had me working out, then I see these 3 guys running the gym, and they just like beating each other up. I'm like, dang, who these guys? You know what I mean? Like, you know, at the time, like Pete was the biggest one, and then Damon, and then you had a scrawny Mark, you know what I mean? And they all just beating each other up, you know, playing one-on-one, knockout and all that stuff. And I was like, man, that's what it's about, you know, brother love. And come to find out, that's when both our dads had taught, and found out they were both from Philly, and you know, went to the same high school, and the rest is history, man. I mean, from that point on, man, we've been together working out numerous days, numerous hours, man. But, you know, they took me in like that, like I was one of their brothers, man. So it was crazy.
And Tony, you play, and I've heard this about you from other people. I heard you were a football player. Like, I heard you could play.
Yeah, man. Like, everybody thought that I was going to be a football player and get a scholarship to play quarterback, man. Like, DeRock Chrome, man, always said I was the best quarterback that never played. And what happened was, you know, my sophomore year, I was playing, and I was really like an option quarterback. You know what I mean? I could put it in the hole, hide it, throw, whatever. And when I went to pass, some guy hit my thumb, and I had to have surgery. And that point on, my dad was like, look, you got to choose, man. Like, what you want to do? If you want to play football, I'm all for it. But if you want to go basketball, we can go basketball. But you know, from that point on, man, I was like, let me go ahead and go to this basketball thing.
And Tony, I'm glad you brought up dads, because both your fathers had a huge impact on both your careers, you and Damon. And your fathers, both of your fathers, I have a lot of respect for. Just let everybody know, like, when it comes to your dad, Tony, what kind of impact did he have on you on and off the court, the legacy you have now? What did he teach you about being a man and just a basketball player, a professional, a real student athlete?
You know, first thing is my dad, you know, he definitely taught me how to appreciate things. You know, growing up, he wasn't able to play sports. Growing up in Philly, he had to come home every day and he had to watch his sister, and, he had to grow up fast and go to school, come home, clean, do whatever he had to do. But, with him, he gave me the opportunity just to go ahead and do the things that I wanted to do, but I had to earn it, you know what I mean? And one thing about my dad was growing up in Philadelphia, me being in a military family, he put me in downtown Newport News where I was able to just go out there and not be scared and have heart and play against guys that was going to beat me up and not, look at me like, oh, I'm soft or whatever. But, for him, man, he wasn't an athletic guy. I mean, he ran track or whatever, but he was an X and O's guy. And I think what he helped me do was learn the game of basketball, like watch film, study film. So when I used to watch basketball, it wasn't like I was just looking at it. I was really watching what was going on the court. And that helped me now as well as then, just knowing how to play basketball. But other than that, man, he was a big inspiration, helped me be the man that I am.
Yeah. And Damon, you come from a basketball family. Tony mentioned Pete and Mark. Mark's coaching. He played football and basketball. You're one of the best basketball players that played at Hampton, like Tony was for Bethel. But at the same time, how was your father's impact? Because I've heard legendary stories about your grandfather and your dad. How was
no, my dad was just he was a basketball guy, like Tone said, X and O. Like, my dad would tell us, like, he would teach us like where you need to shoot it off on the backboard, like where you need to get your foot to a certain spot. Like, he would work on making sure your form was perfect. Like, he was just really, really technical about the sport of basketball, and he would spend as much time with you as he wanted. But he wasn't going to force it on you. Like, we used to get up in the morning, go work out. My dad would say, listen, I'm not going to wake you up. If you want to go work out, you got to wake me up. He's like, if you wake me up, I'm going, but I'm not coming in here to wake you up. If you want it, I'm with you. I'm going to support you, but I'm not going to push it on you. And he was just really, like, my dad, even now when I talk to people, I got a whole bunch of old people saying, because my dad had all these old people saying, my dad would tell me, like, listen, Dame, the truth can always stand inspection, or, why not your best? And, he would always have all of these old sayings that at 16, 17, 18 years old, I used to be like, man, this dude gonna keep saying me to death. But, now that I'm 45 years old, I'm like, Dad, I get it, and I appreciate all that knowledge you poured into me. And so he was just always really about doing the right thing because it was the right thing to do. And, and even in basketball, like, listen, you're going to play the right way. Like, I can remember my sophomore year, I'm complaining, like, oh, Dad, they passed me the ball. He said, listen, man, people shoot about 50% from the field. That means half the time they shoot, they're going to miss. Find out where they miss, go get it, and you ain't got to never worry about nobody passing you the ball no more. And, he was just like that. It wasn't no excuses. You weren't going to come in and say the coach don't like me, he's not playing me. Make him play you. Like, he was just really about that, and it's really helped me out in my later life. It's that kind of, you got to take total ownership in what it is that you're doing. No matter what, you can't look and blame nobody else. It's got to really be on you. And he was just huge on that, and I'll appreciate him forever for that.
Yeah, and with that being said, you guys both mentioned AAU, and I remember not the first one you were Morocco and them, but the one a few years later we were in high school. To me, one of the best AAU teams ever, with you and Tone, and then Iverson and everybody else, Faisal Abraham. Talk about the AAU team, Tony, you first, and Damon, you second. Talk about the AAU team, who was on it, who went on to where, but also just how has AAU changed? Talk about that team, and then Tony, how has AAU changed since then? Because I know now, I go down there, I was telling Damon before we got on the call and went live, when I take my son down there, I show him all the banners, and I say how I know half those guys, and I show him, your banners in the gym. And for him, he looks at Boo Williams, that's the mecca of basketball. But I say, hey, I remember when Boo had one court at Eaton Middle School, and then he had to find gym space like everybody else. Now, you guys were part of a legacy that is huge now. I mean, Boo Williams is known globally, and you guys were on a very elite team. Other team I think of is the one with Alonzo and Kevin Swan and them. But Tony, talk about that team, and also how has AAU changed in your perspective?
Yeah, AAU has definitely changed. I think, like I think I had mentioned it earlier this week. when we first started playing, we were actually the first 10 or 11 and under group that Boo started. At first, it was just only 17 and under, and most of his teams were across the water. Basketball was not on the Hampton side. It really was just basically on the Norfolk side. But that AAU team, man, like I said, we had Aaron Brooks, who, man, he was a big, tall guard. We had AI. We had Damon, he didn't even play guard. I believe Damon was one of the tallest guys on the team. So he was actually playing 3-4. You know what I mean? Of course, we had AI. We had Lambiot. We had Tyreek Turner. I mean, we had so many guys on that team. Faisal Abraham. I mean, we had guys. Joe Smith, I believe, played with us. Man, we had guys that went and became #1 draft picks in the NBA. Were able to play in big-time conferences. But how AAU has changed now is like everybody has an AAU team. And to me, when we played, it was one team, Boo Williams. It was one team, Richmond. It was one team, Roanoke. It was one team from Stanton. It was one team from Northern Virginia. And we all met at Richmond. We had a state championship, and we went from there. Now, Boo Williams, you had to be the top 15 guy from the area. And if he wasn't that, you wasn't going to play. You just had to work hard. I looked at, Michael Jordan's thing when he got cut from his sophomore year. His mom's like, well, just work harder and make it the next year. And that's what we had to do. You know what I mean? Nowadays, if you get cut from one AAU team, you go to the next one. If you don't get no time, you go to the next one. It ain't no, I'm going to sit it out here and I'm going to work hard. I'm going to beat the next guy up, or I'm going to beat the next guy coming in. It's like, oh, if you're going to play him, I'm gone. You know what I mean? So to me, that's the biggest difference between AAU now and back then is no sense of being competitive. I think it's just everybody feels like since there's so many teams that they'll go from one team to the other. But to me, when you get to college, what are you going to do then? And you have to have that sense of competitiveness in you.
Yeah, I agree. And Damon, what are your thoughts on that team and what AAU evolving?
What I always tell people, every now and then people bring up AAU, and I don't even talk basketball much. And I tell them, listen, man, you couldn't beat my AAU team, not the 17 and under. I said, you had 8 guys go D1. I mean, and then, 5 of those went big time. Like you said, Tony went to Wake Forest. I went to Alabama. Allen Iverson went to Georgetown. Joe Smith went to Maryland. And those 2 were back-to-back #1 picks. Then you had Derek Bryant, who went to Bucknell. You had Mike Sharp on that team, who was 6'8", who went to George Mason. You had Tyreek Turner, who was a 6'5" point guard, who went to St. John's. And then, we came off the bench with Algernon Joyner, who played football at Wake Forest. And then you had, Jay from Portsmouth, who Jay Clark, who went to IC Norcom, was a heck of a basketball player, ended up going to HU to play football.
Beast.
When you start talking about those lineups there, Faisal
Abraham with the Marquette.
Yeah. So when you start talking about that lineup and all those guys going big time on the same team, you had a heck of a team there. And and we fought and scrapped and clawed. Chuck got a lot of the publicity. And he deserved it. He deserved it. I mean, I remember that summer he had a one hell of an AAU tournament, but everybody was on there was good. I mean, when you have, like I said, you had so many guys going 1A Division I from that one team, that means you had a pretty good squad there. And I agree with Tone. It was like you either play Boo Williams or you didn't play nothing. And that was kind of it. It wasn't no other team. And, I can remember years before that 17 under team where we would finish 3rd in the state. And we wouldn't go to nationals. That'd be the end of our season. It's over. You played the state tournament. You came in 3rd place. You had to finish top 2 to go to nationals. You didn't finish top 2 in the nationals. End the season. We'll see you guys next March. See if you guys. And even with that team, that 17 under team, I think we finished 2nd in the state. We lost to Richmond, to Harold Dean and James Pelham and Ed Perry. And Ed Perry played for
Sherrod, I believe.
Yeah, and Edmund Sherrod. And we came in 2nd place to them that year, so we didn't even win the state. So if we would have lost one more game, we wouldn't even went to nationals with that team, who ended up winning the national title. So, I mean, it's just so much different. Like now these kids, they're going to play in tournaments. They're guaranteed because they're Nike-sponsored team. Like we begged Boo to get a pair of Hirachis. Boo promised us, I can remember, Boo, can we get some sneakers? I'm gonna buy y'all some Huaraches if y'all win. I mean, and he ended up not buying us Huaraches. We
They
got
still owe shoes.
Yeah, he still owes pair of sneakers. And then, Boo, if you ever watch this, you still owe me a pair of sneaks, boy. I know you got it. But man, you know, it was like that. We were just playing just to play. Our uniforms didn't match. Like, these kids would never be caught dead in this stuff. We had different color blue uniforms, but we were a bunch of country dudes from Hampton, Virginia that nobody had ever heard of, trying to put our name on the map. And that summer, we put our name and our city on the map that summer.
You know, when I look at, I remember me and Milo and a few of the guys, we came to some of those games when you are playing locally before y'all went on. But you know what I remember a lot about that year and even the build up to those years is what became the Hampton Bethel rivalry in basketball. And I was a football player, I was on the basketball team. But Damon, that was you and Tony's show, and along with Chuck. But I remember how the build up from 10th grade, my 10th grade year, and then 11th grade, where it went from, it was a rivalry game to it became must-see TV. I mean, we had games in football and basketball that came on TV, but you're talking about games that got moved to the Hampton Coliseum. The Fort Eustis Christmas tournament was sold out. There were people standing around under the basket. And then the Mecca, the game for the district championship, tournament championship, was moved to the Hampton Coliseum. According to my accounts, prior to and since, no games in basketball in the Peninsula District or even on the South Side, Norfolk, Chesapeake, and Virginia Beach, have ever drawn that kind of crowd. And you think about it, you, Tony, and Chuck were the top three players in the district, in the region, and in the state. What are your thoughts about that, Rob? What do y'all remember about the rivalry game? Tony, you and Chuck, people still debate it now, the best backcourt in Virginia high school basketball history. There's some people that say Brett and Marseille. It's always a debate, but, there's some guys over in Norfolk that talk about some of their squads over in Maury and Booker T. In my opinion, it was you and Chuck. But those battles you had with Damon and Hampton, and, we can get into kick and tan too, but what do you think when you reflect on that rivalry game and the attention it drew and how it changed the landscape of Tidewater basketball, the Peninsula District basketball?
Man, it was some of our best rivalries I've seen in a long time. Even when I was young, like I said, my dad made me a student of the game, and I used to go. It wasn't no loyalty to no school. If it was good basketball, we were there. You know what I mean? If it was good football, we was there. I think I followed more Hampton Crabber football games than anything else, where we leave early and it'd be cold, and we'd drive 2-3 hours to go see games. I had a cousin who played at Tab with Terry Kirby and Chris Slade, and when they played Brian Stitt, I mean, it was crazy. But to know that every game that we played that year when it was Hampton sold out. I mean, whether it's Fort Eustis, it was at y'all's place. And from when we played at Hampton, then they had to move it to Hampton University. That sold out. I mean, it was stories saying that state troopers on the exit talking about if you come to the game, you can't get off of the exit. I mean, that's ridiculous. But the fact that we was able to go to the Hampton Coliseum and have the biggest crowd ever, we gave them a show. I mean, I still look back at it. I think it might have been different. I think, Damon is coming off of a wrist injury at that time. I think, I don't know, he got a cast on it after that game, but I mean, he still put up numbers. I mean, he fought tooth and nail before that game, and it was towards the end of the game when we pulled it out. But man, I mean, like I said, to me, I always looked at myself as a Crabber anyway, because most of my friends were from Hampton anyway.
Yeah.
But, when we became on the court, I mean, it was like, it was no friends, no love lost afterwards. I mean, we did what we did off the court, but when it was on the court, man, we fought ourselves tooth and nail before anything gave it. But man, it was a rival that I don't think it will ever match what happens now, especially now the game today, where everybody's going to private school or they transferring and all that stuff. Nobody really stuck to it in public school, man. Like, it was it, man. If you really wanted to become a successful player, you either go to one of those schools and you battled it out.
You know what, Tony, you make a great point when you talk about Tab and Terry Kirby and you and your dad leaving early, going to the games, Hampton, Phoebus, all those games, because in the 757, particularly on the peninsula side of things, basketball was always known, but you guys, you and Damon and Chuck and Boo Williams, y'all brought it to the peninsula. And then to take it a step further, football was it. Like, you know, it was no surprise for it to be 10,000 people at Darling. But those 2 years with you, Damon, and Chuck, and when you guys evolved, and then the games meant so much, and it brought national attention, guys from across the water, from Richmond, from Northern Virginia. Basketball after that began to change, and it became, okay, we're known for basketball and football, which I think is remarkable. You know, Damon, when you reflect on those games, because what I always, before you answer, what I always reflect on is the fact that you and Tone were best friends, and then you had to turn off that switch, and I saw y'all talk and go at it. Yeah, I
all
saw
the time.
Yeah, I mean, and it was crazy. And then, you know, Chuck, you know, he always talked no matter what. And then you had Chuck and Giuseppe going at it, and Jamel, and then Steve Pringle, and there were so many little inner battles going on. But you and Tone, it was crazy because he's right. After the game and before, it was all love. I mean, I remember all of us being at parties after the game together. Y'all rode together to some of them.
Definitely.
But when you think about it, Damon, what are your thoughts about those battles?
I think it was a buildup, right? Because it started, like, for me in Hampton, watching Kevin Swan and Aaron Mundy and Rick Hunter, and then over at Bethel where they had Corey Stewart and Chris Jackson, you know, and so you started to watch these basketball get better around there. You know, that 89, 90, when Hampton won the state championship, that went back to back, and we lost in the state championship game to Bayside, and Bethel was getting really good. And then, you know, you've got Tone and Chuck coming up, and it was just kind of a buildup that, you know, basketball was coming to our area and it was getting good. So for me, it was guys I was able to look up to say, I want to be better than him. You know, like, I want to be better than that guy. And then, you know, I can remember my sophomore year, if you looked at the district and you looked at, like, the scoring leaders, it was like Faisal Abraham, he was a junior. It was me, I was a sophomore. It was Tone, he was a freshman. And so, you know, you had all these young guys that were starting to, you know, put up some numbers and lead the district in scoring. So it started to be a buildup, like, who are these guys? And then we go out there and make some national noise, and all of a sudden people are starting to watch. And now you've got, you know, me and you talked about this earlier, you know, you talked that Hampton team that we played on that year, we're the number one team in the state. We won 17 straight games. And, you know, you have 3 Division I basketball players on that team. You have myself, you know, who went to Alabama. Jamel went to A&T. Jonathan Baker went to University of Richmond. You know, you're on that team. You're a big time Division I football player. You know, so you've got some good athletes on that team. On Bethel's team, you got, you know, Allen, who went to Georgetown. You got Tony, who went to Wake Forrest. You got Xavier Gunn, who played football at Hampton University. So now you've got some really, really good players out there on that basketball court, and it's kind of must-see TV. And it built up, like, you know, our junior year, Bethel beat us twice, and then we beat them in the district tournament to go to the regionals. And so now it's the year to come back. Now Bethel's number 6 in the state. We play in Fort Eustis in the Christmas tournament championship game. It's a nail biter. It's 83-80, a packed house in it, 2,500 people. Everybody kind of lives up to the billing. You know, the next game now is Hampton University, and now that's sold out, and that game lives up to the billing. So the next game, all the marbles on the line. And, you know, at that time, you've probably got 3 of the top 7 basketball players in the state of Virginia on that court, you know, between me, Allen, and Tone. And so now everybody wants to see, what is it? And that game comes down to, you know, it's a 2-point game. I think Kaffee missed the last second shot. You know, if he hits that 3, Hampton wins the game by 1 point. And, you know, nobody disappointed. Tone led Bethel scoring that night at 26. I think I had 29, led Hampton. And you know, Allen had 21 that night, or 24, and that was an off night for him. And so, I mean, you're seeing things that you never saw before. You had 2 people out there who averaged 30 points a game. That had never been done in the district. And then you got another guy, you know, Tone's averaging 21. And if you go the next year back, Tone becomes the player of the year in the state of Virginia. Allen's the player of the year one year, Tone's the player of the year the next year. Like, you've got some really, really good basketball talent out on that court, and people really want to come see if it was what it was, if we were going to live up to the hype. And I just remember those times so great and being so excited about it. And, you know, like you said, Tone and I, like, grade school, like when short shorts were in, well, when you had no choice but to wear short shorts, you know.
They joke about my shorts, man. They in now.
Yeah, we still joke about, man, he could get away with wearing them now, but we still joke about it to this day. But, you know, we were spending the night at each other's house, you know, before we went to Hampton and Bethel, when Tone was at Davis and I was at Lindsay. And, you know, we used to dream about playing together. I can remember being in Langley Gym, Tone throwing me alley-oops, talking about, when we go to Syracuse together, this is what we're going to do. And, you know, like, so we were friends before basketball, but we also came up in an era where when you stepped across that court, it didn't matter if it was your brother, your father, whoever. You were going to play 100% hard. And if you had to fight him out there, you were going to fight him, but you guys were going to make up after the court. And it was going to be love. It wasn't going to be personal. We were competing and trying to win. And I just remember I used to love those games. Those were my best games. Those were my most favorite games because I knew them dudes. And I knew that I would see them on Saturday night and I could brag if we won, or I just had to be quiet if we lost. So, you know, I
Yeah.
But I like to talk. I like to talk trash. So I really was trying to win so I could talk, you know. But, you know,
But it was also the hardest games because we knew each other's games. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So got off, that means you really got off, because I felt like, you know, everybody talk about, you know, LeBron James and everybody working out together, whatever. But once you're on the court, man, you have no friends. That's the hardest thing. Like, if the easiest part is in the game, but like, it's like when we played in the games, we were practicing together because we always worked out together. We knew what spots that if we got to this spot, I knew what he was about to do. Pull up, use that backboard. And he knew the same thing for me. But at the end of the day, if we can get it off, man, that just showed that we really were skilled at and perfected what we did.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you guys this, man. And Tony, I watched you at Wake Forest. I saw you at Hampton, and I mean against Hampton in those games. But I saw you. You, to me, to this day, one of the best shooters I've ever seen. I mean, and I've been around some great ones as far as just playing with Jonathan Baker and other guys. I watched other guys. I know you and I had a discussion about J.J. Redick one time on Facebook, and I was laughing because Tony was like, he all right. You know what I'm saying? You know, and that was that Duke Wake Forest rivalry. But the cool thing about Tony, and I always thought you were a great shooter. And Damon, you know, I was your teammate, and we went to school together, and I always brag about that 51-point game. I want to ask you guys to do something. I want, Tony, you start first. What did you love the most about, well, answer this second. What did you love most about Damon's game? What did you admire and respect? But before you do that, tell me, how did you become such a great shooter? Like, I think, you know, when I play this for my son and other kids, you know, now everybody got these machines. I remember one time I posted on Instagram and you said, hey, tell them to move the machine bag. You gave me some feedback from my son. How did you become such a great shooter? You could do other stuff. You could put the ball on the court and dribble, but how did you become such a great shooter? And then what did you admire most about Damon's game?
Well, you know, I would say when I started playing basketball, just like Damon, he was one of the tallest ones on the team. So I could say that I was one of the tallest ones on the team. So I would just be like, oh, I'm going to drive to the hole. My dad would be like, drive to the hole, put your head down, drive to the hole, get to the free throw line. You know, and that was just it. Then when I met Mr. Bacote, man, he really got me at a great time when I was in the 7th grade, and he really taught me the fundamentals of getting your elbow to the target, following through, and just perfecting it. I think everybody's shot is going to be different, but he's the one that really gave me the foundation of how to shoot. And that was just like doing drills every day. You know, and like Damon said, he will always say stuff to make you think. And it's just basically like, man, if you do this all the time, your brain is telling you this is the right way to do it. And he'll get mad if we do it the wrong way, you know. And so we constantly, it was like we had to do it the right way. We had to do it the right way. So when we went to sleep, that's all we thought was the right way to do it. You know what I mean? And when we woke up, that's all we did was form shoot, and we would shoot right. So that's, I mean, it's just about practicing and just really being focused on what it is that you have to do. The thing with Damon, man, what I really admired about Damon, man, he was just smooth with it. I mean, it wasn't like he was the most flashiest guy, you know what I mean? But yet he didn't look athletic, but if you gave it to him, he really would dunk on you, you know what I mean? And that's just how it was. But when it came to Damon, man, and I think like I admired a lot of it, his size, he used his body really well. And for his size, man, he really, really could score. And he knew his spots and he knew how to score. And I took that a lot from him. And I guess I take a lot of it because Mr. Bacote taught us, you know, and that was one thing that I try to learn is once you get to your spots and I get to my spot, I'm going to pull up because that's where we practice. And Damon had spots on the court wherever he was, he would get to it and it was over with. And you know, once I got used to like finding where your spots was, where it's 5 and 6, and he, like I said, his dad always had sayings 5 and 6, and that's the backboard spots or your elbows or whatever. We were doing drills that guys were doing now. Like he would just like have us turn around, he'll roll the ball or throw the ball, and we had to go get it and pick it up and shoot from where it was. But that's what drills are like guys are doing now. But we were doing it back then in 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade. You know, like Damon said, man, if it was the summertime, we didn't need a gym. Man, we had a tree branch, we had this backyard, and we had a chair, and we were doing drills in the backyard. And then we would walk to wherever game was at. We would walk to wherever court there was and play. If we heard it was a game, we had to wait till 5 o'clock because that's when his mom came home from the VA hospital where she worked, and we would go straight to the open gym. But we had to wait. That was it. You know what I mean? But we always worked on our craft, like no matter what, if it was open gym or what. We weren't in there trying to dunk. We weren't in there trying to show off or whatever, but we was in there trying to win and we was trying to work on our craft.
Yeah, yeah. And Damon, same thing. What did you admire about Tony's game? And go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, what I admire about Tony's game, what a lot of people didn't understand was Tony was tough. He was like he could shoot it, and you know everybody talked about how good he shot it. And, you know, and sometimes you could think somebody who's shooting it is soft, like, you know, because they stand on the perimeter, they shooting. But Tone was tough as nails. Like Tone wasn't scared. You know, he wasn't scared of the moment. Like he was just a tough guy, and he was a lot tougher than people thought. And you know, Tone, you sleep on him. Tone had some hops. You know, before his knees went bad.
Hey,
you know,
yes,
Tone had some hops. He could handle it. Like he was just a really good and solid basketball player. And I think, you know, because he played with, you know, all-time great now, and people didn't realize how good Tony was. And I mean, he was just really good. And even he was just a tenacious guy. And I remember like being in Alabama, watching him play down in Wake Forrest and being like, yo, that's my man right there. And just watching him play and like, he's out there getting off and he's representing for us out there. And I loved it. And I was always so proud of him because he never backed down. He didn't let anybody scare him. Like every moment was never too big. And, you know, you can't never teach a kid to make the moment not too big for him. And that's how Tone was. The moment was never too big for him. And I always admired that about him. Like, it just didn't matter. He was going to, you know, play as hard as possible all the time. And he would always step up when it was a big moment.
Well, yeah, and you know, you mentioned his hops. There's a video. I got some of the stuff I've got converted to digital. And it's one game we were playing them, and he went up and backwards and banged.
Definitely.
Tony had bounce.
Tony.
I was the last one, man. Look, when we used to work out, Damon was touching the rim and dunking and stuff. We had to do gorilla drills. I had to do gorilla drills just to touch the rubber of the bottom of the backboard. Because remember, I was just happy that I broke a piece off and I think I took it home. I was like, yo, I took the backboard. You know, that was a late bloomer. But, you know, it just go back to what Damon said, man. I think, you know, one thing that Mr. Bacote and my dad, you know, really taught us, man, we were sponges. You know what I mean? We really absorbed everybody's game and we took pieces from everybody, even on TV, and we added it to our game. And when we did, man, it was, well, like you said, Damon scored 51, man. It was nonchalant. I mean, it wasn't a quiet 51, but everybody knew he had 51 because he just did it so nonchalant. It was just like he was there, you know what I mean? And that's what, you know, Damon was just like silky smooth. Like I said, he give you one of them runs. You be like, who is this guy? You know how he run? I mean, he's not the fastest guy, but he running down court. You be like, he's long and lanky, but he keeps running. But then he give it to you however he want. You know what I mean? And that's just how it was. And I think really, I really think that if we were to play today and work as hard as we did back then, by far, man, we're in the NBA, man. You're talking about one of the top 2 players to come out, and Damon being able to play with his back to the basket, facing up with his size and length. You know what I mean? And me being healthy and being 1 and 2, man, it's just crazy.
Yeah, I agree, man. Dame, I didn't ask you, but I asked Tony, for you, was the same person, was your dad, like, that helped you with that skill set, being able to score and average 30? Was it him, or is there anybody else you want to give credit to that was involved in your journey?
Like, my dad did a lot. Like, he had us all in the gym. But I always want to give shout out to David Six as well, right? When I was in 10th grade, he started being assistant coach at Hampton High. And, you talked about this earlier, like sometimes you hear it different from somebody else than your parent. And, Six was there at practice every day. My dad wasn't at practice every day, so Six could help me out at practice if something was going on and make some adjustments. And he would talk with my dad, and my dad would say, tell him to do this in the game or tell him to do that. And so Six was a big influence for me from the time I was 15 till probably I was about 21. He helped me out with a lot of stuff, but my dad was really in the gym with us. I mean, teaching us running hook shots and, make sure we follow through and stay with it. And we just spent a tremendous amount of time working out. I was telling you, like, I don't remember summers. Like, it wasn't a whole lot of hanging out. It was, like Tone said, we were in the back with a steel chair doing the scissors exercise to work on our core back when working on your core wasn't a thing. Or we were measuring how high we could jump by the tree branch in the back. Did you touch the tree branch today? Did you touch it by the end of the summer? If you didn't touch it by the end of the summer, you didn't get your hops right. Doing gorilla drills, playing basketball at every turn. Like, even if we couldn't wait for my mom to get home from work, we walked to the little neighborhood park and just would hoop. And it'd be a group of us. It'd be about 4 or 5 of us. We'd be dragging my little brother along. He didn't have no choice but to come along with us. But we were having a good time, man, learning how to play basketball. From the time I was, 12, 13 till I can remember, to probably I was, 21, 22 years old.
For sure. So
it's crazy. Hold on. It's crazy that you said that, and he mentioned Six because, it's crazy. The story is I give my dad a lot of credit, and I was just talking to a coach from Vanderbilt. David, Coach Grace. My dad actually was the one that would take a lot of military guys and put them in the basketball settings. And he's the one that got him involved with Boo Williams in basketball. And now he's the head assistant with Coach Stackhouse at Vanderbilt. Well, come to find out, David Six my dad brought David Six to Bethel. And he was like, hey, Coach Bailey, we want David Six, this is a guy that you probably need to come help, whatever. And Coach Bailey at the time was like, nah, we're good, whatever. And David Six went straight to Hampton. I guess my dad, pushed him to Coach Bacote or whatever. And the next Coach Six is at Hampton. Well, the same thing happened with JD, Coach Daniels. Coach Daniels was in the military. It just so happened after he told Coach Six no, he actually brought Coach Daniels in the following year to help us out. And so it was a lot of guys that really pushed, like I'm pretty sure Six pushed him, but, Coach Daniels, man, he was this quick, gritty guy that really, like, made us practice hard and pushed us in practice, man. But those are the type of guys that got us better, man. It was those military guys playing at Langley and, happened to come and help us out, man. It's those guys that really got us. And I give a lot of credit to Coach Daniels and Coach Barry, who came. He was a Bethel grad. He came and helped, and he would practice. Man, it was this big, chunky guy, man. He would just beat us up. But that got us tough, man. That really got us tough and got us better, man. So when we would play Hampton, and y'all try to play us physical, because that's what it was, man. It was like, man, y'all got to play Chuck physical. Y'all got to put your body on tone. Y'all got to get them frustrated. We already was prepared because that's how we would practice, man. Like, y'all would beat us up. But big shout outs to David Six, who's one of the best women's coach in the NCAA, man. His time is coming. I know he's going to get this big thing soon.
Me too. I agree. He is.
Yeah, man. I mean, he's doing I hope he put his name in for ODU, honestly.
Yeah, I do. Speaking of ODU in college, Tony, I'll let you go first. Damon, obviously you as well. How did you choose Wake Forest, and who recruited you, and what schools did it come down to? Because, for me, Tony, when I look at your career, I mean, Damon made a good point. Cats knew you were a baller. Like, it was obvious. I mean, you had big shots, big moments, but you played with. Again, I know that's just two. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody. Childress was a monster, but you played with Duncan and Iverson. But before all of that, how did you end up going to Wake Forest? I mean, like, who recruited you? Was Wake Forest the school? Sometimes there's a story behind the story. Like, how'd you end up at Wake Forest?
Well, honestly, I could say it started like 8th grade going to 9th grade. We had 5-star camp, you know what I mean? And at the time, Coach Odom was running 5-star camp. This is when college coaches can actually run the 5-star camp. And Damon had, of course, mentioned like, us going to 5-star, playing against Rasheed Wallace and all that stuff. But one of the coaches was Coach Wainwright, and his son, was actually on my team. And so we were on the team, and he kept telling his dad, like, yo, this guy's, he's pretty good. And back then, I was playing in some Air Force Ones, man. We was at Radford. I was like, because my dad left. I was like, I want to play a slow top. And so we actually had a great tournament, and I think I made the All-Star team. And from that point on, Coach Wainwright was sending me letters, and but he ended up leaving. But Coach Stokes ended up taking over. But I almost Tick Price, I think he was at ODU at the time, ended up going to Auburn. I was really close to signing with Auburn. Of course, Richmond at the time, because Damon was at Richmond. I really wanted to go to Richmond because of him, because I really wanted to play with him. You know what I mean? And then it was Wake Forest and UVA. But UVA had one scholarship left. Curtis Staples had signed. He had took it. I didn't hear anything from him after that. And then I just took a visit to Auburn, almost went there. And then Wake Forest was pretty much, it was close to home, but it wasn't close to home, where my dad couldn't come every day. And I couldn't go home every day. I wanted to kind of like be on my own. And being in the ACC, I think really helped me, growing up watching UVA, Ralph Sampson and all them. It really helped me decide that I wanted to go to an ACC school. When I was at Auburn, they played Florida. They were on probation. Florida was like the #1 team, and I realized there it was a football school. And I was like, I don't know if I really want to be in this type of environment, where I knew Wake Forest. They had a mediocre football team at the time, but basketball was on the up and up. They always were in the mid-level, and I felt like that I could come in and play under Randolph. Because Randolph was the biggest one. Tim was still, he was still in the learning process. But if I felt like that I could play, we can get some recognition and be on TV almost every day. So that was the biggest thing for me choosing Wake Forest, is being close, being in the ACC, and having the opportunity to win.
And I would be remiss if I didn't ask, how was it playing with Tim Duncan? I mean, I don't know Tim. I mean, you see him on TV, you get, but I even remember when Virginia Tech was playing Wake Forest in football, they honored that team. They brought you guys back, and I saw how you would dress. You still look like you Tony, you could dress, and Childress and the rest. And then I see Tim Duncan look like he going to the beach. Is he? I mean, how is he? I mean, we know he's a Hall of Fame player, but like, was he teammate wise? Was he cool, laid back, funny? What's Tim's deal?
Man, he's all that. He's all cool, laid back. Tim is Tim. The thing that I could say about Tim Duncan, man, he was one of those guys that if like, he was one of the best guys that played Sega Genesis, man. Like, he knew all the combo hits for Mortal Kombat. I mean, he knew all the games for NCAAs. He knew he knew it all. You know what I mean? And every time we came into the locker room, that's just where we were at. We was in there, we was playing games, you know what I mean? But, he stayed off campus, and I'm not, not condoning whatever, but, if he had parties or whatever, I mean, he is the coolest. I mean, if you're in his circle, you're in his circle. And I think a lot of times I tell people all the time, like, you know, they're saying some guys they're saying, oh, they're arrogant or they're not nice on the NBA or NFL circuit. But until you live that life or you've been there, you just don't know what they go through, you know, and just hanging out or going out to eat. The first time somebody come ask for an autograph, next you know, the whole restaurant coming. So at that point in time, they get that point where they say, look, I'm trying to eat with my family, you know, just hold off until afterwards. They take that, oh, he's being, you know, this and that. But it's just a matter of them trying to spend time with their family and be. But other than that, laugh, joke, man, shoot the breeze with you. I mean, humble, play games, do whatever you want to do. You know, like he's different. You know what I mean? Because he has a car shop in San Antonio, and I mean, they create like all these like the Punisher looks like the Punisher car. Like he put big tires on trucks. I mean, he just does that. He used to collect swords. When we were in college, man, he had swords, samurai swords, stars. So he was just one of those type of guys that did all that, man. But you know, he's from the island. You know, we was in a room one time. He got a call from somebody from St. Croix, man. He started talking like he was from the island. I'm like, man, what? Who is that? You know, but anytime else, you know, he's just regular Tim. But when he started talking to somebody from St. Croix or whatever, man, he was just like talking fast. He was talking like he was from the island. I'm like, yo, Tim, I never heard you talk like that. He's like, I only talk like that when I'm talking to my people. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Now, you know, Tim, man, until somebody posts on Facebook or Twitter or even Instagram about his stats for the NBA and even college, he's so humble, but you forget he was right there as far as the accomplishments with Kobe. He just played, you know, he played a different position. He just, you forget about that. But I mean, I was telling my son, you know, guards are more, you know, you guys are guard. Oh yeah, he did this, the cross. I said, yo, Tim was that dude, but I think, you know, we forget that because he just did his job and he made it look easy, but he was an absolute dog on that court, man.
He was.
Yeah.
He sure
Nobody
was.
got under his skin, man. He was just like, his game was just like they said, big fundamental. He was just a boring guy, but got the numbers done. He was the ultimate teammate. And I tell you that he's the ultimate teammate. He's gonna do whatever it takes to win. And that's just what he don't want all the pub. He don't want all the recognition. He put on the team. He good to go. You know what I mean? And that's just how he was.
Yeah. Damon, I remember we were in school together. You were a year ahead of me. I remember, you know, I was starting to get recruited and you were already being recruited. And I remember one time, this story stands out because you gave me some advice. And I remember in the hallway, me and you were walking. I saw Mario Gatlin walking there. You know, Hampton's loud or whatever. And I say, hey, yo, D, you got a letter from Maryland? You were talking about Maryland. And I was like, you got to go there, you know, X-ray hip. And we were naming everybody. You were like, yo, Big Vic, man, it's not always about that. It's about finding the right fit. And you're going where you need to go and do what's best for you. When you talk about your recruitment and your story, how did you get to Richmond and then transfer to Alabama? How did that whole thing occur? And who else offered you?
It was interesting because like my last four came down to, it was Richmond, Texas A&M, Maryland, and ODU. And, you know, I went to Maryland. Matter of fact, me and Joe Smith took our visit together to Maryland. And I could just remember being there and Joe was like, come on, man, you got to come here with us. But at that time, they had just had one of their best recruiting class they've ever had. They'd signed X-Ray Hip, Johnny Rhodes, Dwayne Simpkins, and, you know, Johnny Rhodes, X-Ray Hip, Dwayne Simpkins, those guys were all from D.C. And they were all, you know, a year ahead of me. I think Johnny Rhodes was the player of the year in that area. And it was like, you know, if I go there, I'm going to play behind Johnny Rhodes. You know, he's from there. You know, they've got a lot of push to play him. And, you know, I just want to be careful because I want to go somewhere where I'm going to play right away. Like, I want to go somewhere where I could play because you're not going to in my mind, I wanted to go to the NBA. You're not going to the NBA not playing. And so, you know, I said, you know what? I went to Texas A&M and I'll never forget. I loved it down there. Like, you know, they just laid out the red carpet down there at Texas A&M, a great trip. And I come back home and I'm telling my mom, I said, Mom, I'm going to Texas A&M. My mom started crying. Like, you're going to Texas? You going that far away from me?
I can hear your dad say, well, how you getting home?
Exactly, but no, he went on the trip with me. He said, "I understand why the boy want to go. Like we had a good time down there, you know." It was just so far away from home, and so Richmond was just a good fit. At that time I was the highest rated player to ever sign with Richmond, and so it was like, you know what, they sold me on, like, you can come here and we can start a dynasty here. We'll do a whole basketball, around you. You can attract other kids from the area, and we could just really build a dynasty here. So that sounded like, I wanted to be part of something that was going to be special and different. I didn't want to go to a place and just be another player in the pantheon of that place. I wanted to be a player that was going to be special at that place. And I went there, and the guy who recruited me retired. The head coach retired. I signed in February. He retired at the end of the season. And so my first year just didn't go as well as I wanted it to go. And so I was like, you know what? Let me go test the water with big time basketball. And I can remember I called Howard Garfinkel, who ran 5-Star Camp. And I called Garth on the phone, and I said, Garth, I want to leave here. I need some help getting some schools. And man, you don't know Garth, but Garth could curse like a sailor. An old Jewish guy, man, he could curse like a sailor. He said, I told you not to go to that school anyway. You don't never listen to me. I told you I had you. I took care of you. I was going to take care of you. And so Garth, he got on the phone. He called Wake Forrest. He called Patino, Kentucky. He called a lot of different places. He was like, listen, I got a kid. He's the best kept secret in the country, most underrated player in the country. And at that time, coming out of high school, I was top 60 in the country. He was like the most underrated player in the country. You'll love him. And Dave Odom from Wake didn't have scholarships then. Tony and them had just signed and all of that stuff. But his son was at Alabama. And he was like, you know what, I don't have a scholarship, but I think my son and them at Alabama got a scholarship. And so Dave called his son, Lane Odom, at the time. And Lane started recruiting me. I went down to Alabama. And, there's something different. Richmond's a great school, beautiful campus. But when you go to mid-major and then you go down to like a big-time SEC school, it'll just blow you away. And I went down to Bama, and I was like, man, this is crazy down here. And then, at that time, people didn't understand, like, Alabama was a jewel for putting guys in the pros. They had just had Robert Ory, Latrell Sprewell, there was a lot of guys that had went to the NBA that people didn't even know played at Alabama that had played in the NBA. And I tell everybody, I got down there, and we had 4 guys that got drafted. I mean, my 2 roommates, one was Antonio McDyess. He was the number 2 pick in the draft the very next year. And then my other roommate was a guy named Roy Rogers. He was number 20 the year after that. Another one of my teammates, Jason Kaffee, I just saw him last week on The Last Dance. He won 3 championships with Michael Jordan and the Bulls. Right. And then we had another kid named Eric Washington end up getting drafted in the 2nd round and playing about 5 years in the NBA. So we had a really, really good team. Like, there was some really, really good dudes down there that could really play. And so, went down there and was like, man, like, let me see how this works. And I mean, I always tell people, like, our team was so good that year. Our manager is the head coach at Iowa State now. Steve Prohm, was the manager for our team. Like that, we were so good, our manager ended up being a head coach at one of the schools. So, I mean, Alabama was just a place. I went down there, fell in love with it, and really loved my experience down there.
Well, you guys had great college careers. Talk a little bit about what happened. Damon, you can go first. What happened when you were done with Alabama, NBA, overseas, and then how'd you transition? How was the transitional process when you were done with college basketball? What happened after that?
So after Alabama, I left, and I went to I played in the Maltese Islands for a year, and then I went and played in Mexico for a little bit, and then I tried to play in what they called the IBA. It was like the CBA. The CBA had just dissolved, and I played for the Richmond Rhythm. So by 26, for me, my career was over, and I tell everybody that was the hardest point in my life. What I found out about basketball was it wasn't a fun game anymore. It got to a point where it was a business. And I just didn't enjoy the business of basketball. That just, for me, I always played it because I loved to do it. And when it was a business, it just felt different. And I was disillusioned with basketball. But at the same time, I didn't know what else I could be. Because I'd always been a basketball player. Ever since I was 12, 13 years old, my life trajectory was a basketball player. So here I was at 26 trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do with my life from here? And it was a tough transition. It was a extremely tough transition. And it took me about 5 or 6 years because, I tell everybody, I went and did what you're not supposed to do. I went to school for 4 years and I didn't finish. You know, I left to go play overseas, and I had to come back and get my bachelor's degree. I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in liberal arts, and you know, and I'm still trying to figure out like what am I going to do with my life. I worked in the airport before. I've sold insurance, you know, substitute taught, you know, worked as a recruiter, and then you know, my wife, who I'm with now, you know, had somebody that was in non-for-profit doing non-for-profit work, and she said, you know, my husband's looking for a job. I did an interview as a case manager for a welfare to work program, and it just, for non-for-profit, it just went off of that. I knew I found my place. And I ended up going back to school, get my master's in social work. And, you know, and it was just like, I just found like, this is it for me. This is the place where I need to be. And it was, for me, it was fulfilling because I could use all those lessons that I learned in sports, how to be a good teammate, how to work with people, how to deal with people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, races, and really be able to get back to my community. I tell everybody, my mom was a social worker. My dad worked with young men in the Hampton City schools for years. So I fell right back into the family business of working in the community. And I just really love what I'm doing now. But those years, that transition was tough for me because I just didn't think of what I could be besides a basketball player. So it took me at least 6-7 years to figure out like what was my next step. And, you know, now that I found it, I definitely love what I do.
And before I get to Tony, you played against some guys that were dogs, right? Because that's the hard part about transitional. You played with some NBA guys and played against some guys that were dogs on the court, and then you fall short of your dream.
Right. I mean, when you're talking about, you know, playing against Allen and playing against, you know, my freshman year in Richmond, we went down to Wake Forest and played against those guys, Tim Duncan and Randolph Childress. I mean, like I said, 4 of my teammates, I played in the SEC with Corliss Williamson, and that Arkansas team was down there. Me and Tom were just talking on Facebook the other day. We played against that Kentucky team that had Ron Mercer, Antoine Walker, Tony Delk. You know, LSU had Randy Livingston, who was a great player. Like, you know, you played against a whole lot of NBA guys, and not only played against them, held your own. I mean, we've been to Philly, played against Rasheed Wallace. Like, you know, I can remember going to 5-star. You've got all these guys, Keith Booths. On my 5-star team my senior year, it was Stephon Marbury and God Shamgar. We were all on the same team together, and I was the MVP of the camp with those guys on my team, you know.
Wow.
So when you're playing against those guys, and not only playing against them, but holding your own against those guys and right there with them, and you're seeing them go and walk across the stage and shake the commissioner's hand, just like, man, that could have been me, but it just wasn't. So you're just trying to figure out, like, you know, where did I go wrong? What happened? You know, but it just wasn't meant to be for me. There was other things that needed to be done from my end.
Yeah. And Tony, same thing. What happened with you after you were done with Wake? What was your next steps? NBA, overseas, whatever. And then also, who were some of those guys that you played against that stood out?
Yeah, it's always hard to give up basketball because you feel like you work so hard through your younger years, you know what I mean, putting in the hours. But, you know, it was unfortunate for me because talk for me was that I could have left my sophomore year when I was going into the ACC tournament. I was having a great ACC year. I mean, I was, you know, of course we were going up and down during the year. And then we get into the ACC tournament, and I had a good 2-3 games in the tournament, and we're in the championship game in the first half. I'm going at Stephon Marbury, you know what I mean? And then a couple minutes into the second half, that's when I had the injury with tearing my knee up, you know what I mean? But going into that, everybody was saying, oh, yeah, you could have, the way you were playing, you could have left your sophomore year. Yeah, I probably would have went far in the NCAA tournament, because that's when people really got noticed, was in the NCAA tournament. That's when, you know, if I would have had a good NCAA tournament, that takes you from being maybe a second rounder or leaving early to being a top 15. So, you know, like I said, I was rushed a little bit because Tim Duncan was supposed to come back, and he was like, I'm not going to – this is what coach said is, you know, he's not going to come back unless you rehab yourself and you play, you know, for his senior year. Well, you know, I did it, and I think I came back a little bit early. But, you know, going into my senior year, you know, I had an okay year, went to the PIT, I signed with Johnny Cochran, what a lot of people don't understand. I don't know why I did, but, you know, Johnny Cochran was starting a sports agency, and, you know, I went out to LA, played in the LA Summer League. I mean, I played against with Rayford Austin, Skip to my Lou. I'm playing against Tracy McGrady at the time. I mean, I'm giving numbers and I'm putting up numbers. But at the end of the day, it was so political to get in. Unless you were really in, it was so political, and they only had a few spots, you know. And so I went overseas to Korea that year, made great money, then came back and worked out with the Sixers. And at that point in time, everybody was like, yeah, you know, we want you to come in or whatever. And I thought I did pretty good. I'm trying to be a point guard, feel like y'all got Chuck. All y'all need me to do is bring the ball up, pass it to him, play defense. I mean, that's all you really need me to do. Y'all got Chuck. You know, I've done that before. I did it all my life. You know what I mean? And so, you know, Larry Brown has a conversation with me. He's like, look, man, he's like, we like you. We know you got skills, but I just can't play two small guards at the same time. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, all right, that's the politics involved with it. But other than that, man, I went overseas, played in Europe, man, Cyprus, Austria, Dominican, Venezuela. I played in a lot of Euro Cups, in the Middle East Cups. And, you know, one thing I say, you know, being a military family, I think it helped me out. You know, I was able to adjust. Traveling and being over there is like being in the NBA. You know, they treat you like you're in the NBA. They love, no matter what's going on in the States, no matter what the government does, no matter what this is happening, basketball is like a neutral language. Everybody knows it, everybody loves it, and they love the players. And they treated me just as like I was in the NBA. And a lot of people can't do it, but I mean, the ones that can, you really enjoy it. And I wouldn't turn nothing, you know, change anything for the world. I think I was able to experience a lot of cultures, a lot of languages. The only thing that I regret, and I don't really regret it, is I probably should have given up basketball early. And the reason why I say that is because it's so hard to get into coaching now. Back then, it was a lot easier. You know what I mean? You were younger. You know, they can bring you in. Nobody was really trying to get into the college scene. But now with everybody trying to get into the college scene and with AAUs and this and that, if you want to be a coach, you got to do this, you got to do that. If I would have gave, you know, but my pride and feel like, you know, like right now, I wish I can have surgery right now because I hear a lot of these young cats talking trash, and I just feel like that if I had my knees, I really would give it to y'all just a couple more times. I mean, and that's just how I am. You know what I mean? Let me lose a couple of pounds. Let me get these knees right. And then my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make this move, but my body said you lost your mind. And so I'm like, I'm good. But, you know, and that's just the mentality. I'm always going to be competitive no matter what. And I think I said it before. I don't care who it is, but once we're on that court, I feel like that I can beat you at any point in time. I'm not going to back down from nobody, but, you know, that's just one thing. I mean, I love coaching now. I was in law enforcement afterwards. I was in the juvenile system, and then I was in the adult probation, felony probation. Almost very similar to what Damon does, giving back. And now I'm just coaching and stuff. So, and trying to train, I trained Keldon Johnson a couple of times, coached him. Cam Thomas, I put him in the gym a couple of times, taught him a very good scorer nowadays. Keontae Johnson, who's at Florida, you know, we putting a lot of minutes in the gym. So I've done a lot, and I was able to see a lot, and I was able to see a lot of talent through coaching.
Good. Yeah, I think what you're doing is amazing. I try to keep up. Let me ask you both this. With that being said about your journey and how you guys played in different professional leagues and everything like that and trying to get to the NBA, what do you think about this new thing, this new trend right now with the G League and guys potentially skipping college to go to the G League because now they're paying some of the top elite basketball players money and offering this thing where they're going to pay for this? Do you think that is that will be a trend that's going to change?
I think I think they're going to eventually get rid of that and let people go back from high school to straight to the pros. The reason why I say this is my thing. When we were growing up, it was just the CBA. I mean, and I'm gonna tell you like this: it was harder to play in the CBA than it was to play in the NBA, because everybody who played in the CBA was hungry and they can ball. I mean, but once again, it was the politics involved. You had guys who were leading scorers of the CBA that probably could lead the league almost in scoring, but they could not get it. It was just something about it. They couldn't get it over that hump. So being in the G League, I think, is just a way of just keeping the kids here as an insurance policy, other than making them travel overseas and keeping an eye on them. But, I think eventually when a lot of this stuff passes, I think it's either one, you're going to have, just like you said, NBA teams are going to be able to draft people and then put them in the G League and then have them go from there. But it's good. I mean, you're basically going to be able to go straight from high school.
Yeah, I agree with Tone. I don't think the G League is going to last long. I think it's an option now to keep the kids here because they saw those kids go to Australia this year, make a bunch of money, and they're like, hold on, we've got to pay for scouting to go see them over there in Australia. We'd rather pay for scouting to see them here. Save us some money, some financial stuff on our end, and they're going to let them play. I mean, basketball is one of the few professions that you can't go professional when you're a professional. In other sports, so those kids in tennis and golf, they can go professional whenever they want. They don't have to have a certain amount of years in college. If they want, if they're a pro, they're a pro. And but the thing about it is, I laugh at it because it's only for a top few kids. It's for that top 1%. It's not for the kid who was like me, who's number 56 in the country. It's for it's for the kid who's number 1 or number 2 in the country. That are going to get that. So, I mean, it sounds good. Yeah, they're going to give them 500,000 or 100,000, how much they're going to give it. But, that's only for about 4 or 5 kids who will even be eligible or would be good enough to do that. So, those kids, they're pros, sending them to the G League or sending them to college or overseas. They just waiting their time anyway to get to the NBA. And, agents and everything's going to push. Like, their contract's going to start sooner, right? The sooner you can get through your rookie contract, the sooner you can sign the big deal. So, letting them go straight out of high school just makes more sense for everybody involved.
For sure. I guess got a few more questions, man, and we can wrap up. You both mentioned kids and your journey, and I've been part of some of it. But now we are all in a position of fatherhood and coaching, and Tony, you're coaching and training kids. If you were speaking, I have a youth organization, a nonprofit I have, and I have a couple of AAU teams. If you came to my camp, or if you were speaking to 50 to 60 kids right now, 8th and 9th graders, what would you tell them about what it takes to get a scholarship, to become a league? If you have feedback, and I'm not talking about eat your vegetables and go to bed. I mean, be real with them. Like what would you tell them? Like if you were speaking to my kids, Tony, you can go first. What would you tell them?
Work. Honestly, I tell my kids now, when you wake up every day and like you set your alarm and you snooze for 5 minutes, just understand that somebody who sets their alarm, they set their alarm 30 minutes before you do, and they're already working before you even get up. And until you get that mindset that you have to outwork somebody else to get your due recognition, then you're always going to be one step behind. I think people don't understand, like kids don't understand. They watch a lot of stuff on TV. They see the Steph Currys. They see him shooting these long threes. They see, these other LeBron James doing the dunks and all that stuff. But before then, they were in the gym perfecting their craft. That's one thing that we did. Like Mr. Bacote had us in the morning at 6 a.m. before we went to school, perfecting our craft. And there was nobody I could say that outworked us while we were in high school. It was nobody that I could say that was doing the things that we were doing. And that's how you become an elite player. Like you have to do things that nobody is willing to do. Like if you have practice and it ends at 5 o'clock and you are able to run a mile afterwards, as soon as you get home before you even eat, do it, because you're going to one up on somebody. You always have to one up on somebody, because the time that you take off, somebody is not taking off. The time that you feel like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, that next person has already done it and they're already moving on. So while you're making up for what you have not done, they're already advancing and work on something else. And that's just what it is. You have to out, and that's what Kobe did. His mindset, that's what Michael Jordan was. They felt like they outworked and they were going to be better than anyone else.
Absolutely. Well said.
And I think Tony hit the nail right on the head. The only thing I would add to that is you better be willing to sacrifice, right? Because as you start getting better and you start moving up, there's going to be people that are going to offer you things like, you know, come to this party, come hang out here, you know, and you've got to be able to willing to sacrifice and say, nah, I can't do it. You know, I can't have that drink tonight, or I can't, you know, smoke this today. I got to get up in the morning and do my craft. A lot of guys get caught up because they get caught up in a lifestyle, and, you know, yeah, you might be the man in high school, or you might even make it to college and be the man. But if you sacrifice for those small amount of years, you're going to have a lot longer to really enjoy that type of stuff if that's what you're into. So, you know, they've got to be willing to sacrifice. And I agree with Tony. You got to outwork everybody. You know, if you think you working hard, believe me, there's somebody who they don't know who he is. If you got a little bit of reputation, they're going to come for you and try to take your spot. That's how they're going to make their name. I mean, that's how I made my name. Was those guys who had those big names, they had a bullseye on their back. Like, you know what? I'm going to go head to head and I'm going to win because I've been in the gym. You know, I've not only shot 1,000 jumpers, I made 1,000. I wasn't trying to shoot them because shooting don't mean nothing. You better make it in basketball. That's what counts. So we count makes. We're not counting how many we get up. We count how many we make, because that's what matters. And, you know, we just gonna work. And that's why I would tell kids, like, if you're not ready to work, if picking up a basketball is not as familiar to you as picking up your fork to eat, then you're doing the wrong thing. Go ahead and sign off and go play video games and go hang out and enjoy your youth. But if you're gonna work, man, if you're not working on your form, laying in your bed shooting at night, if you're not getting up doing push-ups in the morning, you know, I used to ask kids all the time, what did you do for your game today? And if your answer is nothing, then you're not in the right thing. You don't really want to play. You know,
absolutely.
You want to look nice, and you can do that on your own. But if you want to be elite, man, you better do something for your game every day, because there's guys out there that's doing something for their game every day.
Yeah. So last point, it's not really a question. Do you have any, Tony, I'll start with you, any final thoughts you want to share about what you're doing now, what the game has taught you, or anything you want to give to people that's going to check this out? Anything you want to say?
No, just more about, you know, for the kids, just like you said, if it was more going out for the kids, just don't be scared to compete. You know, trust your game, perfect your game. One thing that my dad used to tell me is stop trying to be like somebody else. You know, be yourself. You know what I mean? You know, you go back to high school, you see the fro, you see, you know, the high socks, you know, and all that stuff. And that was my dad saying, look, just be yourself. You know what I mean? And if people recognize your talent or recognize you, they're going to try to be like you. You know what I mean? And that's just where it is. Start your own style. You know, just like Damon said, it's about competing. I mean, you know, it's the little things. You don't have to be in the gym. It kills me when kids say, oh, there's no gyms around or whatever. You don't need a gym. We didn't have a gym. It wasn't gyms always around. You know what I mean? It's just like Damon said, like now you get bands, you do push-ups. You know, it wasn't no Vertimax. We did guerrilla drills. You know what I mean? It wasn't that. I mean, if you have a basketball, it could be flat, but you're shooting the ball in the air, like on your back. You know what I mean? And that's where you get better. And that's what I said, like, you know, stretching and doing all. I still to this day tell the things that Mr. Bacote used to instill in us when we were young. It was hanging off the steps at night before you go to bed. It was stretching. You know what I mean? Those little things, it stuck with me. You know what I mean? Hanging over the steps is basically to build up your ankle. So if you sprain your ankle, you won't be out that long. And I'm like, that makes sense. You know what I mean? But to this day, I did it. You know what I mean? And stretching, because if you stretch, your muscles start to grow and then your bones got to go with it. You know what I mean? So, you know, people, oh, how you get taller or this and that. You just got to do the little things. And working out does get you better. You know what I mean? And once you get it in your mind, that's the right way. You know, your body's gonna follow.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, you know what, Vic? My journey has taught me really how to work in life. You know, not just in sports. It taught me how to work in life. I mean, I do anti-gun violence work around the state of New York, and I just realized, like, there's a lot of people that don't understand about how to work and how to work with other people and how to work as a teammate and, you know, and how to work in a group. And, you know, sports has really taught me how to work and taught me how to work the right way and really be able to give back. And I think that's really the biggest lesson is that, you know, that working with people, because in your whole life, you're always going to have to work in some kind of team. You're never going to be out here on your own. And so you're always going to have to work with people. And, you know, right now, that's the biggest thing. So, you know, I can walk in any place, you know, I work with a lot of guys who are what they call A-type personalities. And they're just like, and I'm kind of laid back. Most people think I'm kind of laid back. And they're like, well, how are you going to deal with all those A-type personalities? I'm like, man, listen, I've been in locker rooms. I've been around A-type person. I said on the low, I'm an A-type personality myself. You know, I said, I fit right in there. So, you know, but it was those years in those locker rooms and like Tone said, competing and being able to do all of that and not in understanding, like living in this moment and competing in this moment. Like, I'm going to compete in this moment. I'm going to give it all I got. And when it's done, I can leave and say, I gave it all I have and I can be satisfied with that. And so, you know, that's just what sports has taught me. Like, you know, when that buzzer goes off, the result's going to be what you put in, you know, and the result's going to take care of itself. And like a big part of my work, I tell people that work for me or that I supervise, I say, you know what, the score is always going to be the score. I said, it's going to be the process, how you get there. And I just know in all my sports endeavors, it was never the final outcome. It was a process, and the final outcome would take care of itself. And so I'm just big into that now in my life. That sports taught me is like, if you put the work in and you do the right thing, you might lose some, but in the long run, you're going to win more than you lose if you do it right all the time.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both, man, for being part of this Legacy Spotlight, man. I can tell you, just being around both of you pretty much most of my life, you guys have two great legacies on and off the court. You're great people, funny people, competitive people. But I think more importantly, you had an impact on a lot of people's lives. And I appreciate you both, your friendship, your insight. God bless you both. Thank you both for being part of this show today. And I look forward to getting you on my podcast, both of you guys.
I appreciate it, Big. Thanks for having us, man. Really appreciate it.
We're gonna take this to ESPN.
Yeah, look, and we doing Vicktory Life. We doing a shameless plug here for Vicktory Life here. Leave a legacy.
I appreciate you both, man. Thank you, man.
No problem, Vic. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Bye.